Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. So today we are going to talk briefly about Lady Saori's lore. That's right guys, for those of you who don't already know, we've got a brand new hero skin in For Honor, a Nobushi hero skin, Lady Saori. And as I like to do with all hero skins, I like to read their lore out for you guys. I like to go to the Ubisoft's official short story that they write for the hero skin. I read the story to you, I read the whole lore to you, and then I come back later and I talk about my thoughts on it as a writer, as a historian, and everything in between. And so after reading Lady Saori's lore for you guys, I'm ready to talk about her lore and tell you my thoughts on it. Now, before we go any further, if you have not heard the lore yet, if you haven't listened to the short story, then none of what I'm about to talk about will make any sense to you. So, you can go to the link down in the description where you can go read the short story for yourself. It'll be a link to the website. Or you can listen to me read it and support me by going to the video that I made where I did nothing but read Lady Saori's lore. Please go do one or the other, otherwise everything I'm about to say in this video will make no sense to you, okay? Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's get into Lady Saori's lore. Let's do this. So Lady Saori's lore is broken into 4 parts. We have an introductory piece, and then that leads into parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, all labeled attack, retreat, and fall. So in the introductory portion, we have Lady Saori in a dreamlike state where she's lost in this dark forest or dark realm. There's a large shadow coming towards her. She doesn't know what it is. It's all very creepy and scary, and she constantly hears the phrase, "Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up." And this is a phrase that's repeated throughout the story, in fact. And then that cuts to her waking up in part 1. But in part 1, it has her waking up, or showing up, on the castle wall, looking out and seeing a huge invasion force on the way. This huge, massive army led by an enemy of her family, Katsuo. Now, why is Katsuo invading? We don't know. We know that he's power hungry. We know that he's got a hungry desire for strength. And Castle Chiyo, her home, is apparently a very prominent and powerful castle in the mire, and he apparently wants it, and now it's his time to strike since her husband, Masaki, the daimyo of this castle apparently, is off away on a meeting with the emperor, and he's taken their whole army with him, so the castle is relatively undefended. I'll get into why that's stupid in just a minute, but roll with me here. So it turns out she was awoken by her aide, Junpei, who is currently in the middle of fighting off all these enemies, and he keeps saying, "I'm sorry I had to wake you, I'm really sorry I had to wake you, but we got a crisis here, and I'm like, why are you sorry you had to wake her? This is a crisis. This is kind of the time you want to wake her." So she says, no, don't feel bad about it. Let's get to work. And so they start fighting off the enemy. And she says, we just got to hold out till morning. If we can make it through the night, my husband will return with reinforcements and we will see this day won. It's a slim hope. She even acknowledges that, but they're going to try. But just as she's thinking that, suddenly they break through and now they're invading into the city proper. Now she's got to think on what to do next. And then that leads into part 2, where after they've broken through, she's seeing all these people die. She's running past corpses of people she knew, people she trusted and liked. Like she mentions a baker that she knew really well, who she would go to every day for bread, and a gardener that she really liked who brought her flowers. And kind of an aside here, this is just an aside thing, that did jump out at me because I'm like, Saori, you're a daimyo's wife. You wouldn't need to go see these people. You wouldn't need to leave the estate. I mean, I get it, you could, but daily? I don't know. Because people would bring you this stuff. If you wanted bread or flowers, your samurai in attendance would get it for you. You know what I'm saying? But that's minor. That's a small thing. It's not a big deal. I'm not saying that's a problem with the story. It was just something that kind of jumped out at me. So anyway, things are getting really bad, and suddenly, while she's thinking about how disastrous things are, how bad things are, she hears this shriek in her head, this loud, otherworldly scream. But no one else hears it. Junpei doesn't hear it. He basically comes to her and says, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "Didn't you hear that?" "No, I didn't hear anything. What are you talking about? Look." And he points out that they're getting closer. Katsuo and his forces have broken through, and they're pouring into the city and into the castle, and they are going to take everything. And he's saying, "What do we do now?" And she thinks back, and she thinks about her son Yoshiro. Yeah, that name is just dropped there. We'll get to that. She thinks about her son Yoshiro. She found his letter, and she's glad that he's not here because she has to keep on living for him. She has to live for him. She says, let's pull back. Let's get to the sanctum of the castle. We'll hold out there. We might still survive. So they retreat to the inner sanctum. That leads into part 3, where things have basically gone belly up. Junpei's gone. We don't know where he is. He's probably dead. All of her forces are scattered, divided, or dead. She is basically standing alone against the massive, unending waves of Katsuo's military, She can't hold out any longer. She falls to her knees. She knows this is it. She cries. She laments that she'll never see her husband Masaki or her son Yoshiro again. She laments all the people she failed and let down. It is just such an awful situation. And then Katsuo, the enemy himself, shows up to mock her. And in that moment, her pain and grief and despair take over. And then we hear, "Wake up." Very creepy and good ending right there. So, what are my thoughts on this story? What do I think about it? I think this is a pretty good story, but it's got some problems. Let's start with the good, though. I want to start with the good. I think the best thing I can say about this story, the best thing, is I love the parallelism of the castle falling and her breakdown. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. I noticed this as I was reading. With each phase of the castle's invasion, we see Saori's will and humanity break down a bit more. Let's be honest, guys. I think it's pretty fair to say that something dark is nestled inside Saori, and it's trying to get out. It's trying to wake up. Even though the wake up could be to Saori waking up from her dream state, in reality, I think this is a voice telling her inner self, her inner monster, to wake up. And I think we can all kind of assume she's actually the Jorogumo. Can we all assume that? Let's assume that's correct. If this is the Jorogumo starting to wake up, as the castle's being invaded, we're seeing the Jorogumo gradually start to awaken. And I think that's really cool. I just love that. I love that that's the way it's going. And did you notice how with each phase, it gets a little worse? Think about it. In the first phase, when it's just the initial invasion, she has hope, you know? She has hope. She thinks they can still win. She thinks that they can still come out of this. But then they break through the first barricade. They're inside. They're killing civilians. They're killing all these people she knows, people she loves. It's getting a little less hopeful. In fact, she doesn't even truly believe that her husband will return. It's too slim of a hope. And then she hears the scream. No one else hears it. She loses her temper. And even Junpei recognizes, and she recognizes this isn't like her. Something's wrong. But then she remembers Yoshiro, she remembers her son. Okay, hold on to that. Hold on to your son. Hold on to that slim hope that you might live. Retreat a little further. Now they're in the sanctum. Everyone's gone. There is no hope. It's all over. And that's when she gives in. That's when it falls apart. That's when whatever is inside her, whatever is trying to wake up, awakens. That's good parallelism. I like the way that works, where with each phase of the invasion, she herself is giving in to this monster, which, that's cool. I like that. That was really neat. The second thing I like about it is the emotional investment of Saori in her people and in her family. It would have been so easy just to make her an unfeeling, very stoic Nobushi who just, all sacrifices are acceptable. Like, you could totally create a character like that, especially since you're creating this character that's meant to be a yokai. Like, if this is the Jorogumo, as we assume, it would be very easy to make her an unfeeling, very frightening individual. Because in a lot of yokai legend, yokai come from these bad people who end up becoming yokai because their evil transfers over. But no, we have a very sympathetic character who becomes a yokai. We don't know if it's because of what's going on. Maybe it was always there, and this is just the spark that set it off. But we see the emotional investment in everybody and everything around her, which I did appreciate. The third thing I like, clear demonstration of stakes and gradual losses piling up. One thing I gotta say that I did like, well, mostly. There's a caveat, but we'll get to that. I like that we see the stakes being laid out. Her husband is gone. His armies are gone with him. This is her castle. It belonged to her ancestors. She cares about the people here. She has a son. He's not here. She's losing this castle ground. We know what losing all this means to her. We know why this is emotionally impacting her. We see how much she cares about other people and what their losses and absence mean to her. That's clear demonstration of the stakes and the look at the gradual losses. So I appreciated that. And then finally, third part, the fourth thing I liked, the repeated callback to the building monster within. I brought this up in the beginning, but I still like this. One thing that I think this story did well was it didn't lose sight of the monster growing within her. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could have just focused entirely on the battle and not even bring up the monster and then just have that pop out at the very end. But they constantly draw back to something's happening, Saori's changing, something's going on, and we don't know what. So I appreciated that. But now, let's get into the bad. So, There are some things that I got to say bad. And I think the worst thing in this, the pacing is clunky and bad information drops. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. We open up the story with a dream sequence which phases right into her being on the castle wall. I don't think that was a right decision, especially when we get to part 2 of the story and we see her just name drop Yoshiro in his letter out of nowhere. Where literally it is phrased with, what happens is she hears the scream in her head, she sees the destruction, Junpei asks her what to do, and then suddenly, and she thought of her son Yoshiro. She had found his letter. At least he was far away from all this. Who's Yoshiro? Where did this come from? What? You just kind of name dropped this. When did you find his letter? Where was his letter? What did that letter say? Where is your son Yoshiro? Is he with your husband? See, that just kind of came out of nowhere. And it was a last minute, and that's what I mean by clunky information and lore drops. Just, oh, by the way, Yoshiro. That's a thing now. What could have been done, and this is what I would recommend should have been done, honestly, I would have taken out the majority of that dream sequence. You could have had it where she wakes up in bed in a cold sweat. What you do is, here's how you do it. You open up the story with, wake up. She sits up in bed, shocked, looking around, cold sweat. And you could say she had dreams that didn't make sense, dreams of shadowy nightmares, of long legs, of web everywhere, kind of hinting at the Jorogumo. Then it could have her looking around and seeing that she's still in her room, still in her bed. You could have her look and notice that her bed is empty. Her husband is not there. That reveals why her husband is away, where he's gone. She could look over at her bedside table and see the letter. That was from Yoshiro, her son. That introduces Yoshiro and that stake. This introduces us to Masaki and Yoshiro. We now understand the family and what's going on. And she hears battle in the distance, but it seems weird. Is she still kind of half dreaming? She gets up and she's wandering around getting dressed, kind of in a daze, like thinking about that dream, thinking about all that happened. And then you hear Junpei running and go, Your Highness, wake up, you're already awake. Quick, we've got a crisis, you gotta help us. And then that brings us into part 1. I think that would have been a lot better, because through that, we still get the creepy edginess of the dream, but we also get the introduction of Masaki and Yoshiro without them having to be name dropped very clunkily. I think that was handled very poorly. Could have been done better. That was the big issue I had there. The next issue. Masaki taking their entire army with him makes no practical sense. I'm not even talking historical. It makes no practical sense. Masaki dragging away the entire army. You would never do this. No lord or king would ever leave their home, especially one as important as Castle Chiyo. The story goes into detail about how important Castle Chiyo is. I believe that she explained it in part 2. Like she said, what was it? Chiyo was not just a name. It was a monument to samurai legacy. And it was a sentiment carried proudly by all those who called the castle and its village home. Like, it was a very important place. Apparently, it had been a structure that had been there long before the cataclysm even happened. I mean, this is an important place. Why would you leave it undefended? Especially for just a brief visit to the Emperor. You don't do that. Now, there's a way to fix this. It could be, and this is just a theory, what if Masaki intended this? Maybe he knows what his wife is, and he's trying to get her killed. Maybe he deliberately let Katsuo invade so that he could take care of his wife. That's a very cynical look, and it's just a theory. I have no evidence for it, but it's the only thing that makes sense. Why would any daimyo leave his wife and his castle undefended like that? Oh, but he trusted his fellow daimyo. Bullshit. If you know anything about Japanese history, you know the daimyo never trusted each other. Woo! That was not a thing. But anyway, that's the second problem. The third problem, there was too much focus on the man-to-man fighting and not enough on strategic action. This is kind of an irk for me, but I noticed throughout the story, we never see what Saori or Junpei are doing to rally their forces. Like, we never hear, barricade that wall, or they're breaching there, mark it, or archers on this position. You know, there was never any moment where they were trying to, set up kind of strategic emplacements. And you could argue, well, that wasn't the point of the story, Raven. They were trying to focus. I understand that. But in moments like this, where your castle is being besieged, it's not just a matter of the enemies coming in and you just fight them wildly. You set up defenses. You reorganize what little troops you have. And I know, well, they don't have an army. They had enough to fight. You could do something. Like, it irked me that we focused way more on just fight, and not enough on how are we going to hold off the enemy. But that's just an irk thing. It's not a big deal. It was just an irk thing for me. The last problem I take and this is probably the final problem I could really look at this with. Katsuo's motivations are slim. Katsuo introduces this villain who Saori describes as hungry, which we can assume is he wants power, he wants prestige, he wants position, he wants fame and fortune, I guess. And of course, Castle Chio is such an important castle. Obviously, he'd want it. But I don't know. Doesn't this seem a little weird? Like, think about it like this. Let's say that he takes Castle Chio. Okay. You think the Emperor is just going to be okay with that? You think the Emperor is just going to be like, well, that's fine. That's how it goes. No, I'm pretty sure Masaki would go, Your Highness, Katsuo just invaded my home, killed my wife, and stole my territory. And the Emperor would say, yeah, we're fixing that right now. He had to think there was a problem here, right? Which leads back to my position that maybe this was planned somewhere along the way by someone else. That's just a theory, though. But my point is, what was Katsuo's motivation for doing this? Was it just hatred for Masaki? Did he know that Saori might be a Jorogumo? Did he get permission from the Emperor? What was the plan here? What was the motivation? I'm not entirely sure. We didn't get a whole lot on Katsuo. In fact, we didn't get a lot on Masaki or Yoshiro or Katsuo. And you're like, well, obviously, Raven, this was about Saori, not about them. True, but we got more on Junpei than we did about them. Like, did you notice this, guys? We don't know what any of these guys were. Like, Junpei was there fighting. What was he? Was he an Orochi? Was he a Kensei? Was he a Shugoki? What was he? We don't know what Junpei was. We got so little on anyone else. And I know that it's Saori's legend, but we want to understand kind of what we're seeing and what's going on. Who is Masaki? Who is Yoshiro? Where is Yoshiro? What was Junpei? What is Katsuo? What are their goals? What do they want? If we understand the relation to each other, then we can understand more the conflict. And that's just my personal perspective on it. So, final thoughts on the legend. I liked it, actually. I mean, I know that I just went off on some of the bad things about it, but I don't think it was a bad legend. I think it was really good. I thought it was creative, and it sets up a really cool kind of thriller, kind of fun story where I'm kind of like, ooh, I kind of want to know the rest. I kind of want to know what happens. What happens to Katsuo? If she is the Jorogumo, what happens to Castle Chio? How do they fix it? What happens when Masaki and Yoshiro come home to this? Will she recognize them? That kind of thing. I think that's a really cool story, and I'm excited for a part 2, if there is a part 2, which I imagine there will be. We're getting another hero skin in the second half of the season, so I would assume we're getting a part 2. We better, because I want to see what happens next. So, very, very interested. But for what it is right now, there were a lot of questions I had, and a lot of things that felt a little unanswered, but overall, I did like this story. I like this legend. But what do you guys think? Do you like the Legend of Saori? Did you enjoy this? Do you understand the problems I had with it? Or do you think that I'm overanalyzing, as I often do? Let me know down in the comment section below. Get yourself a hero skin. It looks really, really cool. And I will see you in my next video. Take care.